All right. What is up? I got Brandon Winchell on today.
Hello.
Brandon Winchell is a friend from high school and now also college. I'm very excited to have him on. I think he's a smart, funny person, and I think we can have some interesting conversations.
Definitely.
So, my first question for you is, you, like a year or two ago, actually did a bit of a podcast yourself, right?
Yes.
It was called the Intersectional Podcast,
Correct.
right? I actually listened to a few episodes.
Okay.
I found it personally entertaining. I couldn't tell for sure if it was like the content or if it was just because it was like you guys and it's I do you guys. But I was curious, what was your inspiration for starting it?
So I talk a lot, and I think one of the big reasons I wanted to start it is because I felt like it was something that would like help other students. Because coming from like a perspective where I was in the IB program. And like in school, like there's always so many different perspectives. We wanted to try to come together as a group of a bunch of different people from different backgrounds and try to like provide some semblance of like a student voice, where academics, like usually it's always the staff that and the teachers that always bring everything, and then all the students kind of just exist, you know?
Yeah.
So, and then also we had to do like some project for our IB program, which was supposed to be like a group project, and we needed to get like 20 or something. I don't know how many hours, I forget. But we needed to get a certain number of hours for it to be completed, and we were like, this would be a perfect opportunity. Originally, we were going to do it with the whole IB class, like 16.
Wait, a whole podcast? But
Yes. Well, okay.
that's a lot of mics.
We weren't going to have the whole group there every podcast, but we were going to try to utilize everyone's opinions and perspectives because we thought that would like add to the diversity of like the opinions we were seeing. But it didn't end up happening because it was way too hard to plan with everyone. So then we made it into like a group of 4. We still tried to include them at points, but it was just like very difficult. Even with just us 4, we didn't record in person. So we had to figure out how to record each of our audios on our own. So we're all recording on our phones. We would do this thing where we'd all try to clap at the same time. We'd pull up a timer like on some website and basically like we'd say when it hits like 2:30 and 25 seconds, we'd all try to clap. So then it would sync up, and then when I was going back into audio editing, I would try to sync that up.
That's smart because I was curious because did you like talk over Zoom or something?
We talked over Discord.
Oh, because I was curious how you would solve for the delay, maybe. But the online timer makes sense.
Yeah.
That's creative.
I think it was Fahim's idea or something. I don't think I came up with it, but we had to find a way to make sure our audios were going to be like at the same time because we were all recording from remote locations.
And was that because of COVID, or like were you planning on doing it in person and then COVID happened, or?
I'm not even 100% sure.
Gotcha.
I forget what exactly happened, but we kind of just did it because it was more convenient. We could record more like if we all had like something going on like 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after, like we didn't have to meet up, do a whole setup. And I think it did kind of reduce the quality of the podcast we created. We didn't have video or anything.
Did you guys, like I know you didn't have video in the podcast, but were you guys able to see each other, or was it just...
No.
Oh, okay.
No, so
that
it
seems
was
tough.
It was like a phone call.
Yeah, I see.
So it's like, I think a big part about podcasting is like you're having a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
And obviously, you can still have a conversation over the phone, but it's just a much different environment than like when you could actually see the person. It's like, I don't know. So we just used Discord. We didn't have cameras on or anything, just the audio call. And recording, we had like people recording on different things. I think I was recording on my phone. I think Karina might have been recording on something different.
Sorry, I'm laughing because I remember I was listening to one, and since you guys were recording on different things, I think someone had like a slightly worse mic than the others.
Yes.
So every time they came in, it was like, shh. I was like, oh, she's about to talk or he's about to talk.
The thing is, we tried to solve for those issues, and I was like, maybe just record on your phone. But I think Karina's PC was like really loud, so she couldn't do that. So I think she was recording on her like headset. But then her headset had some static in the background, and then I had like an actual microphone, and Fahim was recording on his phone, and Lily was doing something else. It was like completely different ways of like recording for each person, and it was like it didn't sound as good as it could have. But I wasn't gonna be like, oh, everyone needs to get a microphone, blah blah blah.
What I think is really cool though is even though you had all these like kind of like like a shitty mic setup, to be frank.
Yeah.
Like, that didn't prevent you from doing it. Because I feel like a lot of people want to try something, but they're like, oh, I got to have all this money to buy this tech beforehand. Where you guys just thought, well, we're never going to learn how to actually do it.
Yeah. So we didn't really, like, think about as much into the technical aspects of doing it. And that made, like, the editing of it a lot harder for me. Because I was the one who would, I put all the audio clips in one thing. And because of the mic quality being bad, I'd sometimes have to cut out everyone's audio individually when they weren't talking because there was too much background noise. So I couldn't even like use a noise profile or like a limiter to like cut out the like static part because like it was just so inconsistent.
Oh, I see what you mean.
So I had to do like all that manually, and it took forever. And I think maybe trying to approach it from a different perspective and looking at like the technical aspects first would have helped. But we didn't do that. We were like, we just want to like try this. And I think that was like obviously a good thing because we wouldn't have started if we like took too long to look at the technical aspects.
Dude, the whole thing about putting the separate tracks and then having to like cut out specific parts of each track. So I was in choir during COVID, right? Yeah. So we would record each kid. So you had like 100-person choir recording on their own phone or something, and then putting all of those tracks into this thing. Dude, I had to edit some of those. Oh my God. Terrible. So
I'm sure. I heard similar things from like orchestra because I wasn't in any music program.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine.
But it was, they like, all had to like, and I think you probably had to level that too because obviously like when you're playing in like a live musical group like or you're singing or whatever, you know like the volume that you need to sing at compared to everyone else. But like if you're recording it, obviously it's going to depend on the mic and the gain level and whatever.
And not everyone knows like what clipping is. So they'll be like singing and it's like oh.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. But yeah, no, that the logistical part of it was very hard. And then I think another thing that like made it so our podcast kind of lost some quality was like the planning part. It was just hard to come up with ideas, what to talk about and everything. I don't think we...
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you about that because with my podcast, I have like a guest on each time, so I don't really have to think of ideas. It's more just, we have a conversation. By nature of having a different guest, there'll be different topics. So I was curious. I feel like it'd be much harder in your situation where you have the same people in each episode. You got to find like a different thing to talk about.
And the thing is, we're not like some big media corporation where we can like do a bunch of research on like news or whatever, like a specific topic. One time we tried to do like, I think a big podcast on like we were going to do a podcast on the events of all of 2020. And like each of us was going to tackle one different topic. And that didn't end up ever happening because we just like, simply that's too much work for like our group. And I think like having a sort of podcast like yours, it's a lot easier to like do that because you could just like see their perspective. But when we're trying to just use the same people over and over and not really have like that different perspective as much, we were coming up with like weird ideas. Like one of ours was about like food debates. It was like
I watched that one.
It was like, is a hot dog a sandwich? And we just rambled on the whole podcast about like random stuff.
I discovered that macaroni pizza exists because of that podcast.
Oh yeah,
I didn't know that was a thing.
I don't even really remember what we talked about in that podcast, but yeah, it was weird coming up with ideas because a lot of the times our ideas were just weird. I think one of them was like, would you ever live on the moon? Like, I mean, it was an interesting conversation, but I don't think what I thought our issue with our podcast was is it didn't really add insight. Like, we're talking about these topics, but we're not like researching them enough to know enough to provide like something that someone would want to listen to. Like,
yeah, did you ever feel like since you guys were, I don't want to say just high school students, but because you were just high school students, you didn't feel qualified to talk about a lot of things you would have wanted to? Yeah,
and I mean, part of our podcast was like kind of appealing to that high school audience, like, oh, we're giving a perspective that other high school students like would possibly have. So I think that was like one of our strengths, but also like the topics that we chose, we didn't necessarily have enough expertise to like talk about a lot of the times.
Interesting. Yeah, I did appreciate that. You guys did talk a lot about kind of how to survive in high school and like academic stuff, which I think is kind of smart because you took things you were kind of qualified to talk about because you were high school students that were successful in high school. Yeah. So like who better to learn how to become successful in high school than successful high school students?
That's what we were like trying to do with most of the podcasts. But then the issue is we ran into like roadblocks with like how many ideas can we come up with about this? Like how many times can we talk about the same thing? So like our episodes, I think what we were trying to do was first episode, or like all the odd numbered episodes were going to be like about school, about a school topic, something like that, and then all the other ones were like fun topics. But like if you're trying to just be like a podcast and build a brand, you can't like necessarily switch up as much. Like I feel like you should have like a niche, especially when we weren't as established. And
also because you're not having like a different guest on every time, but it's more you four. Mm-hmm. I feel like the audience you would attract would be more based on you guys as a brand rather than people. Like for example, if I bring on a guest that might be popular or something, people might watch it even if they hate me or don't really like like me as like my style of talking. But when it's solely based, when it's like the same people each time, it's like you're the brand that brings the people to the podcast.
No, that makes sense. And I just like, I don't think we had enough of like an established brand. Like we didn't really market ourselves, I guess. I think we were trying to like use the idea as the platform as opposed to like using our like identities and stuff to like build that. I don't know.
I will say I thought the thumbnails were fire.
Oh,
the art.
That was all Lily.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Lily is an artist. That was So we did segment a lot of like, we did compartmentalize like a lot of our responsibilities. Like I was like the audio person, Lily did all like the art and stuff. I think Fahim was responsible for actually like putting it on Spotify and stuff. So we like did diffuse the responsibilities. I think it was just hard for us to like kind of make it something that we really wanted to, and that's why we like stopped.
I remember Fahim told me that you guys, like kind of what you were saying earlier, you wanted to get into like deeper issues, I guess, later on. I was curious what certain things were you interested in talking about in the future, possibly.
Deeper issues. I think a lot of it, like, I don't know, at its conception, a lot of it was about like high school and like problems that we face in high school. I think, like I said, that 2020, the one we were going to do like a 2020 wrap-up podcast about, we were going to talk a lot about like coronavirus and stuff like that. But like I said, I don't think we researched enough, and I don't think we had like the determination to like do this for something that we weren't like required to do for school or anything. But I don't know exactly what deeper issues you might have been touching on.
Interesting.
The thing is, we like a lot of our podcasts, just like the ideas were weird. Like me and him, we had like a solo, like it's like, so it was me, it was 4 people. Me and him did one together, just us two. And then the other 2, Karina and Lily, did one together. And we just...
Was it like a battle of the sexes or something?
I don't know why we did it. I think we wanted to switch it up because I don't think we were like happy with what we were producing or something at that point. At least I was like a little like, we should probably try to do something different. But like we did like favorite movies. Like we didn't really try to do anything like deeper.
Do you feel like you learned anything from doing the podcast?
Oh yeah, I mean I learned quite a bit like about like how you got to organize something, planning. Like it was a lot more about just like working with other people. And like obviously I learned a lot about like the technical aspects of like how you'd have to go about like editing and stuff like that.
What about speaking in general? Do you feel like it helped you at all with that? Because that's one of my main goals of this podcast.
Yeah.
It's just talking.
I don't know. I definitely think subconsciously it did. Like
oh yeah, I see.
I can't really say like specific like things that help me speak about. I try not to ramble, but when we were doing that podcast, I would ramble and ramble and ramble. So I think it didn't help me much from what I like remember like in the process of doing it. But obviously, like subconsciously, I think it did help me speak a lot.
What about just the process of sitting down with other people with like the main goal is to just talk and have a conversation? I feel like that doesn't happen a lot these days. Like you'll hang out with someone and maybe you'll talk a bit, but you're also on your phone or you're getting food. And the main thing in this situation was just talking.
That is something that I think is like really cool about podcasts. And I think I've been reading a lot about like presence and meditation and stuff. And we're just always so distracted in this world. And I think that might have been something that helped me appreciate just like talking to people, really connecting, because I used to be really introverted. I don't know if you remember in high school. I was like pretty shy, I would say, at points. Maybe like as I got older, I got less shy. But after that, like going into college, I feel like I was a lot more extroverted. And maybe the podcast, without me knowing like it did that, made me appreciate it more. Because definitely like I started talking a lot more after like I started getting into like junior, senior year of high school. And that's like when we started the podcast. So maybe. But,
Interesting.
But I guess just as of lately, like come to appreciate talking a lot more just because of like the reading I'm doing on like meditation and stuff like that.
I'm actually really into meditation as well,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm curious what got you into it.
I think the thing that really got me into it, because I struggle a lot with like anxiety issues, and I obviously like I'm trying to find ways, like everyone who has like a mental health problem is like, what do I do to fix it? Like how do you stop feeling like depressed if you're like depressed, or how do you like stop being scared of everything if you're anxious? And I think like doing research, I was like, oh, meditation, like that just sounds so peaceful. So I started doing reading. I started reading into it like on just online articles, and then Headspace, Calm, like all those apps, you know, the marketing, it worked.
Yeah.
So I like got into it. I don't think I ever like purchased a membership for many of them. I just used the free ones, but no, it really, I think that's what spurred my interest.
So how are you been meditating? Do you do it consistently?
I don't do it consistently.
That's fair.
And I want to, and I wish I could more. But the more that I like read into it, there's a lot of different perspectives. There's like the Eastern Asian, like Buddhist philosophy,
it's
and then
kind of
there's
confusing
like
after.
there's now like the new Western perspective where a lot of like I feel like some people are doing it for like the trend, but it's getting more like popular in Western culture, and I think it's like diverging a little bit from its roots. But I've come to realize you can meditate just by like being in the moment. Like you don't have to actively be like sitting like this and just like
yeah, I totally agree. I noticed myself. I talked about it on a few of the podcasts before, but I'll be either hanging out with friends or doing something, right? And maybe something will get me a bit irritated, right?
Yeah.
And before I would just feel like, okay, I'm irritated. I'm in an irritating thought, so I should be irritated right now.
Mm-hmm.
But now I can kind of see it from like a third person perspective, where I see the thought, I'm like, whoa, I'm getting a bit fired up.
Mm-hmm.
Do I really want to be mad about this thing? And then I try to, I guess, analyze the thing that's irritating me and seeing if it's worth it, I guess. Yeah. And it's actually helped in a lot of situations where I probably would have been a dick to my friends or something. Instead, just let it go and then have a good time.
Yeah, so like, have you read any like books specifically, or like do you just like watch YouTube?
I haven't read anything. I watch Sam Harris a lot.
Okay.
And he has a meditation app. I actually got his yearly membership. I haven't used it a lot in the past few weeks, but I think his style of meditation I really liked, because it's pretty much just, it's kind of trying to get in that mode of just seeing your thoughts from a third person perspective and realizing that you are not necessarily your thoughts, because they kind of just pop up. And I don't know, I found that very helpful.
Yeah. Do you know, have you heard of The Power of Now?
Vaguely, but I'm not really sure what it is.
So, do you know Kendrick Lamar, how he just dropped like a new album?
I did it.
Okay.
But that's all. I don't really know rap that well.
No worries. Kendrick Lamar just dropped a new album recently. I forget how long ago it was, probably like a month ago at this point. And it was called, I don't know, the name is irrelevant. Basically, he like was inspired a lot by like Eckhart Tolle, the guy who wrote The Power of Now and like some other books. And his book is all about just like being in the now. Like if you're in the now, nothing is wrong. Like you can't, you've always been able to cope with the now. But if you always place yourself in the past and you like criticize your mistakes, or you always like think about the future and put yourself in like a future situation, you feel like you can't cope. But if you're always just in the now, there's like never a problem, because you've always been able to cope with the now. And there's nothing more that it's crazy.
No, that's all. Sam Harris says that a lot. Like when you're sitting down meditating, sometimes like a mild irritation can start to feel like really bad pain, just because your mind kind of starts acting like it is. And he says that like you might think it's unbearable, but that's because you're thinking of the future pain. Like, oh, I'm gonna have to keep bearing this. But instead, if you think about it, each moment you've been thinking about it, you've been bearing the pain, so it's not unbearable.
Yeah. No, it's crazy to think about. And what I like saw a TikTok on it. It was like, oh, Kendrick Lamar's new album was inspired by this book. And then I read that book. Like I don't think I finished it yet. I've like read most of it. But just like that's what's gotten me back into it recently. And I think like TikTok is crazy. Let me just say that. TikTok is crazy. So there's this guy I see, and he always has like the same ideas. He has a podcast too. I forget his name exactly. It's like Andrew Moraine or something. And he has like a podcast called like Dualistic Unity. And I always see his TikToks, and they're always about this topic. And I don't know if it's the algorithm that's like bringing me back to it.
It's definitely the algorithm.
It's definitely the algorithm. But also it just like shows that there's just this greater interest in meditation, and like that kind of presence that we haven't like seen, I guess, in the recent past and in like Western society. So I think that's just like showing how it's growing.
Yeah, I wonder if it coincides with the rise in mental health, because a lot of people, it seems like nowadays there's a lot, either people are more open about it or there just is more people with mental issues. And then if that's the case, I wonder if meditation is rising in popularity as a remedy
way
to
of like
that.
coping. Yeah. That's what I always thought was really interesting. Is there more mental health issues now, or are we just recognizing them as issues now?
What do you think?
I want to say, well, because I'm in psychology, you know, I've like read like research about this. I think from what I've heard, like it's about like the same, but I feel like I don't believe that. Like,
About the same as in
like,
the same amount?
It's like the same prevalence over the past few years as it was compared to like in the 1980s or something. But I don't know if that's true. Like I maybe that was like one study.
Wait, could it be that maybe it was the same amount, but we just know more about it because of online access?
That could be it. I don't want to believe that. I think the internet is like a problem, but maybe like there was vices like the internet in the past that we used to have. But I think like we're just all so addicted to our phones, to like constant media consumption, and I'm not 100% sure like if that's something that has been researched enough. But I definitely think that's adding to like the mental health problems that we're seeing.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Social media, bro. I feel very lucky because when TikTok started, I never downloaded it, and my sister did. And there's been times where my sister comes in my room to show me one TikTok, and then we sat there for 2 hours just watching. Yes. And I totally could tell if I had it on my phone and like started when it started, I would like it'd be a constant thing I'm watching. So I feel lucky. It's kind of like meth, you know. I've never tried meth, so I don't know how good it is. So I don't feel the need to do it. Yeah. But no, I agree. Social media. I've been trying to cut down. I've cut down everything but Instagram and YouTube. So I'm getting there.
Yeah. The thing about YouTube is like I don't feel like it's as social media.
That's true. It's just I feel like it's one of those things that draw. It's addicting for sure.
It's like longer TikToks that are probably more well made.
Exactly.
It's like in between TikTok and TV is what I would say.
Well, also YouTube kind of tricks you sometimes, because sometimes you'll be watching a video. Maybe it's about self-help. Maybe it's a instructive podcast, and you tell yourself, "Oh, this isn't wasting time. I'm learning," which you know is useful. But when you're just binge watching self-help videos and then afterwards you just go to sleep and don't do any of it, you feel like you've succeeded in something when you really haven't. I fell in that trap a lot during COVID.
Yeah, no, I've never really thought about it, but just like, I don't know, I can't really explain it, but Eckhart Tolle was talking about it, like, we all are just so drawn into the media, and we're like becoming like this kind of hive mind connected by like social media and mass media and like everything, and we're all like kind of trapped in that, and if you don't like realize that we're all like partially addicted, then you're just like still stuck in that. And I feel like I've experienced life differently after like realizing that, and I try to cut down on my phone time as much as I can.
Wait, can you explain that more? What do you mean you feel like you've experienced life differently?
It's weird. So in his book, he kind of talks about this too. Like, you can't really explain it in words.
Okay.
So like, this is actually a couple weeks back when I had COVID, and I was just like, I didn't have a lot to do.
Glad you're better, by the way.
Yes, I appreciate it. I'm doing a lot better. But no, COVID is going crazy right now. It's going crazy. But yeah, so I had nothing to do, and I was in the house all day, and I was like, I'm just gonna go sit outside. And like, sitting outside, like, everyone's like, oh, that's like relaxing. But if you just like sit outside, I think one way that helps me meditate is like, you know, a lot of people like close their eyes and just like sit there. I think like looking at things, like when I just like look around and I'm like, that is just magnificent. It's just insane how much like life there is, kind of, is what, that's kind of the way he describes it, how much life there is in like things that we don't think of as like alive. Like if I just like look at a water bottle, I'm like, that's crazy. Look at how like insane, like we don't recognize how much, like, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying, but like,
no, I kind of get what you're saying. Like, I remember I have these friends and we'll like sit in a hot tub together, and I remember one time I was just sitting there they were talking and I kind of zoned out and I just saw like the steam coming in front of my eyes while I was looking at this palm tree. I was just like, holy shit, this is insane. I wasn't high or anything, you know, I was just enjoying it.
Yeah, you just like don't realize the beauty of everything. And this is like also something like dopamine detox. I don't know if you've heard of that, but I think we're just so drawn into like the things that like quickly catch our attention that we don't really like appreciate life as much as we did in the past, or like as much as people did in the past.
See.
Just because we're like always so trapped into like doing those things that feel good to our brain.
Yeah, like online, everything's very stimulating. So in real life, when you see a water bottle, what's stimulating
like,
about that?
That's a water bottle.
But yeah, exactly. But I guess when you really take time to just look at it, you could maybe start to get that feeling you would get for some TikTok about the water bottle.
Exactly.
Here's an idea. Do you think another reason maybe like things like looking at a water bottle don't seem super crazy, or like looking at nature don't seem cool to us, is because since we're on our phone or TV or watching a screen all the time, our vision's always flattened, right? We're seeing everything kind of in 2D. So then when we look at the real world, I don't know, this is just like spitball. Maybe like we kind of get a flattened view of the world instead of seeing things in true 3D. Because I remember I was listening to this one thing that was talking about being present and kind of saying what you're saying. We're trying to like look at the world around you and really appreciate it. And afterwards I went on a walk and I try to just focus on like what was in front of me. And I literally felt like the world was like coming into like moving past me. It was weird. Like I really felt like I was in a 3D world. It was weird.
No, like, I don't know. I'm, like, trying to focus on it right now and just, like, looking at your face. It's just, like, it's there. Like everything is just so real. But I don't think we really, like, recognize the beauty of, like, the world when we're constantly, like, looking at... Maybe that is what it is. I've never thought about it like that. But, like, 3D versus 2D, everything we see is, like, just a representation of 3D when we're, like, looking on a flat screen. But like truly like being able to experience that is like a whole different thing. Dimensionality is also crazy. Like what like the fact that oh my god. So I watched this video. Sorry, this is tangential.
You're good. That's what conversations are.
So like one dimension is just like one direction, right? And then 2 dimensions you could build like a box, right? Yes. And then 3 dimensions is like what we live in, and then the 4th dimension, like the time dimension, is crazy to me. It's multiple like instances of 3D, and we just constantly are living in like I don't know. It's like what would the 5th dimension even be?
You want to hear something that will blow your mind?
Yes.
I was reading this book, right, and it's one of these theory of everything books where they try to describe all of reality, physics, blah blah blah. So I'm like confused half the fucking time, right? But they're explaining the 4th dimension, and so we think of time as something we could easily move through, right?
Yeah.
And we have this idea of time travel where in the future we could change something because time is fluid, weird shit like that, right? While this bottle, right, it's 3D. So it's something you could just cut through.
Yeah.
Right? So going with your instances in time, this book said, imagine you had a 4-dimensional block, right? So it's like all of those instances stitched together within the time dimension kind of, right? So in order. So it's like, now it's not a fluid thing. It's just a block with the instances in it. And they were talking about, it was so weird. It was like cutting the block up into slices, these instances, and then arranging them in a different order and seeing if we would be able to tell. And the idea was something like, since it's not fluid, like moving through, like since time doesn't change, the actual blocks don't change. It's not like you're moving through time. You're just an instance in time. So we wouldn't technically notice. I don't know if any of that makes sense. I remember reading it just being, what the fuck?
I'm lost, but all the like, it's just crazy to think about that like time is a dimension. According to like physics, they are like, I don't know. I'm not in physics. You're in physics.
Yeah, I'm not that far in physics.
But just like the fact that like time is another like way that we experience dimensions. Like I don't know. It's just I can't even comprehend it to the point where I can speak about it in a coherent manner. That's why I'm just so perplexed sounding right now.
Okay, well, what about this? Thinking about like the idea that time is just like instances of 3-dimensional space, right? So have you heard of this thing called the Boltzmann Brain?
No.
So basically, I'm going to say shit like I sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I really don't. So basically, in quantum mechanics, right, electrons or particles there's a small probability that they'll randomly teleport to another position, right? Okay. So not move there, but teleport, right? So instantaneously. Yeah. So the idea of a Boltzmann brain is it's going to be an extremely low probability that this happens, but it's not zero. It's non-trivial, right? There's a probability that all these electrons and particles randomly teleport into the formation of a fully formed brain, right? And assuming like all of your thoughts and all of your experiences arise from like the physical brain, right? This brain forms, and essentially the idea is that you could be this brain right now, like with all the memories you have. It feels like you've been around forever, but you could have just been made this instant, like through that random teleportation, and like any instance you could just all break apart.
Bro, what?
Isn't that crazy?
That hurts my head to think about.
I remember I tried thinking of when I first read about it, I just kept thinking, I was like, but my memories, I've been around forever. And then I kept thinking, but really like right this second I could have just been created. Right this second,
Right now.
It's so weird to think about.
No, that I remember I told you this a while back, like when we were talking about like the physical and like biological like determinism stuff, like that freaked me out. Because like when someone has like anxiety issues, they feel like they want to be in control of everything, and I've gotten so much better about it. Like I'm like, oh, maybe I am just floating, and like I don't have any like way of dictating what happens next, even with like my choices or my free will. But like that is something again that's just like what. The thing that I think is really interesting is like how could we know that like immaterial things like thoughts and memories and whatnot, how can we know that arises only from like physical, like obviously like from biology, like that's the only thing we can observe as like the physical, but like how do we even
I see
know, like how could you ever prove that definitively?
That's one of the things that kind of annoys me about consciousness is I think I talked about on the last podcast, you'll never be able to fully prove it. Mm-hmm. But yet again, literally anything you'll never technically be able to fully prove because there's always the chance, we're in a simulation or something like that. But I think that point about like the thoughts, right? Immaterial things. Because my question is like, where are the thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's why I'm like, I think physical determinism, like it makes sense. Logically it makes sense, but there's always like doubts. I'm like, where? Like, if it all like arises from that, like, where does it exist then? Does it exist in space, or is there a way it can like exist in physics but not exist in space time? Does that make sense?
No, I totally get you because we don't view thoughts as a physical thing that takes up space, right?
Yeah.
But it's just hard for me to imagine that. I don't know. I feel like it has to be somewhere, It
does. That's what I'm thinking. That's why I'm so perplexed by this issue.
It's interesting. I remember watching some podcast, and this guy was talking about how he doesn't like how scientists always think just in the materialistic world, as if like nothing else exists, because there's the idea of like basically mathematics, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of mathematics isn't physically there.
Yeah.
But like it's kind of like thoughts, like they just exist. I think it's called like Plato's something.
I don't know. Yeah, no, like some philosopher probably came up with this way back. You know what I'm saying? I know what you're saying. But no, I agree. I think somehow we want to be more than our physicality though too. I feel like that's part of it. Like I feel like that's part of like the reason why I'm so resistant to it. But it's also like logically there is holes. Like where do these things like exist? Like, can they just exist as a byproduct?
Well, have you heard of the idea of panpsychism?
What does that mean?
It's essentially the idea that just like an electron has the property of charge or the property of mass, consciousness itself is also just a property of matter, and all pieces of matter have some level of consciousness. And it's kind of like how as you add atoms together, the mass increases. Maybe as you add matter in a specific formation like a human, the level of consciousness increases.
So that's something that Eckhart Tolle was talking about. In his
really?
Book. Like, okay, so he uses consciousness to mean like a lot of things, but that's why he's saying there's like life in everything. He's like, if you look at a leaf, that has consciousness right there. And he talks about how we're losing consciousness as a species because we're getting so addicted to like just constantly consuming what is like pleasing. But pure consciousness is realizing that we are all just one thing part of this one system.
Holy shit.
Exactly. It's crazy.
It kind of makes you think how all the neurons in your head, right, are working together to create the brain, and then there's consciousness. But does each single neuron know that they're contributing to this larger consciousness? And then it's like, well, all of the humans in our species are working together. Could there be like a species-wide consciousness that we don't individually experience?
That's the crazy thing. Is like we're all part of a system, a larger functioning system, and like everything on our body is part of a larger functioning system to make our body work. And then all humans are part of this larger functioning system to make like the Earth work or whatever, life on Earth. And then the Earth is just a part of this larger functioning system to make the solar. It's just like everything is just like minuscule when you really look at it. And one thing, like I've been reading this other book called like How to Influence People and Win Friends or something.
Oh, I know that book. That's a
fantastic.
Yeah, it's a fantastic. I should read it again because it's like really useful stuff.
Yes. We always have like this need to like feel important, but like if you think about it, nothing really matters if you like. I don't know. You don't have TikToks, so this isn't gonna make any sense. But there's TikToks that are like in the grand scheme of the world. It's like basically it will be this video and it'll just be text and it'll be like, oh, I don't want to talk to this girl. And then it just it's like basically a picture of the Earth or like this animation of the Earth, and it zooms out into like the solar system, and it zooms out into like the bigger galaxy. So it's basically saying that like nothing matters. And then people have been starting to like make memes where it's like, I only killed 3 orphans when I ran them over. And then it's like, it just zooms out like it doesn't matter.
That's terrible.
Like, exactly. But like obviously we have morals, and like I'm not saying that's all right.
No, of course. Like, I get it though. I get
but
that.
Like nothing. If we look at the world or like the universe or the multiverse, I don't know. Is a multiverse a thing? Is that a physical thing like in physics?
I've been reading a book, and this one it's called Our Mathematical Universe by Max Tegmark, I think.
Okay.
And he talks. There's actually 4 levels. Theoretically, of a multiverse, and. Okay, I'll give like a real quick explanation because I don't want to go on too long about because I don't feel like I explain it super well. But essentially, the first level is so if space is infinite, right? Then that means there's a finite amount of arrangements atoms can be in a specific space, right? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So essentially, if space is infinite, then there's an infinite amount of like Earths where we're having this exact conversation, stuff like that, right? Yeah. So there's an infinite amount of things, right? So the idea is that the level 1 multiverse, and the problem when talking about multiverse is like people use the word multiverse in different settings. Yeah. So this doesn't mean like completely different universes because it's all part of like the same universe. But essentially, level 1 would be just copies of like these infinite. Like for example, the observable universe, right? It's 13.8 billion light years. Yeah. So that. Right next to it is another one. That would be like a separate multiverse or universe. So that's level 1. And again, I don't know if I'm explaining it amazingly. So then level 2, level 2 is essentially, so there's this thing called inflation theory. I don't know the math behind it or anything like that, but it says that when the Big Bang happened, space started expanding. And you know how when bread dough rises, right? And then you have like a normal loaf of bread, there's like the air pockets in it. Yeah. So the idea is that the universe is a similar thing where it rises super fast, causing these pocket universes to form. And in each universe, the laws of physics are the same, but there's different constants of physics. Yeah. So like an electron might weigh half as much in another universe. So it's really interesting because there's this idea of fine tuning. Have you heard of it?
In music?
No, it's some physics, I don't even know if you'd call it a theory. It's basically the idea that a lot of the physical constants are in such a specific amount to allow humans to exist. Like if an electron was just a few like grams heavier, whatever the number, I don't know the exact number. It's something like that, right? Like that. If it was just a little bit heavier, then maybe atoms wouldn't be able to form bonds and then humans could never exist, right? Okay. So a lot of religious people use that as an argument for, a divine person who created the universe with the fine-tuned things. But this inflationary idea is that, well, actually there's infinite amount of universes with all the different types of constants that exist, and we would just have, like, obviously we're going to be in the one that's good for human life, or else we wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
So then level 3 goes with quantum mechanics. Have you heard of the many worlds theory?
No.
So basically, have you heard so there's like Schrodinger's cat, right?
Yeah.
So an electron can be in two positions a superposition of two positions at once, right? So if it's like spin up, the thought experiment is that it causes this liquid to spill, killing a cat in the box, right? And if it's spin down, it doesn't cause a liquid to spill, cat's alive, right? So the idea is you're taking this microscopic superposition and expanding it to macroscopic object, the cat. So it's like in a superposition of alive and dead, supposedly. So a lot of people just stop here, but the idea of the many worlds theory is that, well, now imagine I'm a scientist looking over the box, and I'm in a room with no windows, and a scientist is outside this room. Well, now I'm in a superposition to the scientist of seeing the cat dead or seeing the cat alive. And the idea is you can keep expanding this to the whole universe. And the many worlds theory basically says that when you measure the particle up or down, it doesn't just collapse, but there's another universe where it's measured the opposite. So that's like a level 3 multiverse, where basically it has something to do with quantum mechanics, right? I'm going on a bit of a tangent. I can't even really explain level 4. I don't really know what it means. I haven't gotten to that part of the book yet. But yeah, so there's theories for the multiverse. I think that's what you originally asked.
My question was, I was like, what is a multiverse? And then you went on to explain, but my whole point, I think, was just that, like, with so much out there, us being so tiny, like, well, it really matters. You know? That's the whole point.
Yeah.
After that long tangent.
No, I know, I kind of went off, but
no, it's okay.
I think that's it's interesting because sometimes it's good to think that in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Like, let's say you want to text a girl, kind of like your TikTok idea. Yeah. It's like, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter, so just do it, right? Yeah. You'll be sad for a day if she rejects you, blah, blah, blah. But then on the other hand, obviously, in like the 3 orphans cases, you need to create some sort of sense of meaning and matter at our scale, or else you just get nihilistic. Yeah. And then just, die.
Yeah. No, it's a weird medium. You gotta find kind of like the happy medium between like not caring and understanding that some things you gotta care about.
I like the idea of like you just create your own meaning, whatever. It's like cliche. Yeah. Like how do you feel like you find meaning in life?
That is a very hard question. Have you read Man's Search for Meaning?
No, I have it on Audible though. I just haven't listened to it.
Because I've read it. It's basically like that. Just create your own meaning. Meaning in life. It's, for the longest time I was younger, and for the longest time I was younger.
Makes sense.
Very human. No, when I was younger is what I meant to say. I used to think like the main goal should be to be happy. But the more I like read into like all this like philosophical, spiritual stuff, like happiness is like a fleeting emotion, and if you're constantly seeking to be happy, like happiness exists in a dichotomy with sadness, and you can only be happy if sadness exists. Does that make sense?
That makes complete sense.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like I'm trying to stop chasing it, but it's so hard because happiness is like any other like addiction. You want to like constantly feel that like positive feeling that you get from it. So I guess like for the longest time, like last semester, 2 semesters ago, last year in college, I was like, my one goal in life is to find peace. Because I was honestly constantly just in like turmoil in my head. I was like, I can't like find any like sense of like rest or like refuge from like all my like thoughts and stuff. And I've now like obviously like everyone wants to be famous. Sorry, this is like kind of tangential, but it like also is like, where do I find meaning? I want to like, everyone wants to be known by other people and like feel important to other people. But I've come to realize like even the most famous people, like if you think about it, like people in other countries have no clue who they are probably sometimes. Like if you think who's like the most famous celebrity you'd say?
I think Elon Musk is pretty popular right now.
Yeah, Elon Musk. But like, are people in like northern Africa that are living in like villages, do they even know who Elon Musk is?
No, I see
does
what
it
you
really
mean,
matter? Like, should you really be chasing fame like on the largest scale if you really want to like if you really like are trying to chase fame? Should you chase fame within like a sphere that matters to you, or should you really just try to like reach as many people as you can? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I was listening to this one podcast, and on the topic of fame, the idea, so back then, fame was more something you got by doing something that helped the world in some way. Yeah. Like you're a scientist, you discover something, and then you become famous for that.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more respectable back then. Whereas now, some people's main goal isn't to do a thing and then get famous from it, but just to get the fame itself.
Yeah.
Right? And have you ever seen those compilations of famous people talking about how being famous sucks, or like it's not what they thought it would be? So have you in the past like had that desire to become famous?
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is like, so I'm like moving to back to California. I've like met all these people for my job, you know, and I like want them to be like, I want them to remember me, because like you want to be remembered, you want to feel important. It's like, what if like all these people that I met in high school, all these people I met at this job, like what if I become famous one day? They're gonna be like, I used to know him. Like, so I kind of want to be famous for like that reason, because people will be like, oh my god, he's so famous, people care about him. But like, the more I think about it, like what I was saying with like people in other countries or like people from different cultures, like they don't really care. So like, should you really even be chasing that if it's like,
it sounds like you're saying, if not everyone, tell me if I'm right, if not everyone on the earth is going to know about you, then it doesn't seem worth it.
I think that's partly like what it comes off as, but I'm saying like, you're trying to be famous, so like people recognize you, so you feel important to like other people. But like, should you just try to do that on a smaller scale? And if that is like the case, should you even try to chase fame, or should you just try to feel important to your like family unit?
So it sounds like you're trying to kind of broad scale. People aren't going to know you, so then it's like even if you're the most famous,
if you're the most famous person in the world, not everyone's going to care about you.
And then you dial that back.
So like, if you like realize that on a smaller scale, like, does it even really, should you even like want to be famous in the first place? Because as long as you matter to the people that are close to you, like, not everyone's going to care about you regardless of how famous you are. I don't know.
I think I get it. It seems it kind of reminds me, like, maybe you'll get famous and you'll be the most famous person in the world, but maybe it still won't be enough, because not everyone's going to know you. And it's like, well, if it's never going to be enough, then maybe fame's not even the way to look.
We're chasing. I think my point is like, we always are chasing this like constant and endless like goal that doesn't exist. And this is one thing like I was talking about with my brother when I was driving back from California last year. Like, we live in a world of like ideas. Like, I have like an idea about how things are going to be, and I think this is kind of like projecting onto the future, like anxiety and stuff like that. Like, I live where I think something is going to be like that, and in reality it's not like that. So like with fame, like I constantly live thinking fame is going to be like this great thing, and I think that's how so many people are. But then when you actually get to that reality of it, it's so much different. And that's why I think so many times people like get addicted to things. They think like doing something is going to make them feel like fulfilled. They think getting this like one last thing is going to make you feel like at peace for the rest of your life. But you got to realize like reality isn't like that, and you always are going to be like chasing something that isn't there if you're going to like constantly be doing that. And that's kind of like what presence is all about. Like, don't be constantly chasing anything. Just like be content with what is.
I really like that point that it could be a cause. Are you saying for addiction, right? The reason you might be addicted to this thing, maybe it's fame, right? Because you keep thinking, oh, just a bit more fame. I'll finally feel good with myself.
That's why
and you're never going to get there.
This is one thing like I've tried to like discuss with other people, and I don't think they fully understand. Like, we can be addicted to like anything. Like, you could get, I mean, obviously, like, you need, like, food. Like, you're not, I mean, you could get addicted to food, obviously, but, like...
You could get addicted to not eating food.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, and that's why, like, all these issues come up, is we get addicted to, like, this idea that doesn't exist. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
So I've constantly thought, like, we're addicted to our phones because, like, we constantly think it's gonna, like... I deleted Instagram, like, years ago or something, and I would open my phone, and I'd go to where Instagram was, like, about to click it, and, like... for some reason it wasn't there, and I was like, there's this whole world that is gone to me. Like, and like, it was the idea that Instagram was like giving me something that it like really shouldn't have been giving me. I don't know. It wasn't providing me with what I thought it was.
Dude, I think Instagram, it's kind of what you were saying about expectations versus reality. You have the expectation that you're going to go on Instagram and you're going to get either a message from someone who you're really excited to talk to, or you're going to see something crazy. And that's kind of, I think that's the more enjoyable part of Instagram than actually looking at Instagram. Yeah. It's like the suspense of what you're going to see. And then you're looking at this shit and it's like, this is so, I don't care what this guy ate.
I was like, I do not give a fuck about
it's weird, right?
And the thing is, with YouTube too, like if I didn't have YouTube, like I feel like there's this whole world, because there's just so much content out there. There's like this whole world that's gone when you like get rid of it. But when you're like actually using it, you're not like waking up to like this new reality. Like, I don't know if that makes sense. Like, I would constantly have this feeling where if I'm not using something, like I'm like, oh, I'll just go on it, and then I'll like feel like better. I'll feel
like when you're shitting, you know. Like if I don't have my phone while I'm using the bathroom, I feel weird.
It's weird.
It's weird, right?
It's like it gives you a different reality for a little bit, like because you kind of immerse yourself in whatever like you're consuming. I don't feel like I'm making any sense.
No, I it's like we're going on a bit of tangents, but I'm keeping up. It's making sense to me.
Yeah, no, and I hope like if people are listening, they're like, oh, I get what you're saying.
I'm thinking about this podcast just like with like the multiverse rant and then this. It's gonna be crazy. I'm gonna get some cool clips out of this.
No, literally,
I'm having a good time though. I swear.
No, I am too, and I think that's one issue that I've had with podcasts in the past is like just feeling like this is just a shit show. What is going on right now? This doesn't make any sense in like any way, shape, or form. But I'm just a tangential person. What were we even talking about right before? The fact that it like opens a world. Yeah, I don't know. But I hope that in my head, all this stuff makes so much sense. And I just struggle to put it into words because some things I feel like you don't really have the words to use. And that's another thing. In different languages, did you know like you can experience things differently in different, like if you live in a different culture because their language has a word to describe it?
Oh yeah, like I heard there's one culture or some language where they didn't have a word for freedom, so it's a lot easier for the government to take away freedoms because they didn't really have an idea of what even freedom is. If you don't have the
words to describe it, you kind of don't really have a conception of what it is, and that's why I think it's so powerful for like people to like write and do all this stuff where they like come up with new concepts. Like I don't know, that was another thing. Like on the way here, I was like, what am I going to talk about today? We just like create things out of nothing. Does that make sense? Like creativity, we just make stuff out of nothing.
That's true. Like, wait, do you mean ideas or physical things? Because physical things, we use things to make them.
No, physical things. I'm not saying in physics like we're creating matter. Like I'm not trying to break Albert Einstein.
That would break some conservation laws.
No, but I'm saying like in terms of ideas, that's another thing where I'm like, can we just be physical if we're like literally creating? Like we just make things up. Does that make sense? I don't know.
I kind of see.
When humans were first here, they didn't have water bottles. Like someone just literally came up with that shit, and now we just have it. It's weird to think about. Like, where does creativity come from? I have no clue. But I'm just ranting about.
No. I'm really enjoying this conversation just because I'm always super. I don't know why. Even when it's like my best friend, I get nervous before each podcast because I'm afraid I'm going to run out of things to say. Yeah. And I say this on almost every podcast. I've been having the opposite problem where the guest starts talking and then there's so many different routes I want to go down. Yes. Which I think is a much better problem to have than just like sitting here like, But I actually, real quick, wanted to go back to the idea of fame we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
So this is something I've been struggling with because I watch a lot of self-help stuff or podcasts where people give advice, and a lot of the advice makes logical sense to me. Like, fame isn't something you should desire super hard because once you actually get it, it doesn't feel the way you thought it would feel. And logically, that makes sense to me. But do you think you still need to actually get to, maybe like it's fame, right? Do you think you actually have to get to a situation of being famous and see it for yourself? Or do you think you could just take other people's word for it?
That's a hard question to answer. But I think it just goes back to the fact that like we're all addicted to like, even if it's not fame, like we don't have to see it. Like I don't have to try meth to realize that. Like
that's a good point. That's a good point.
Because obviously, like you don't want to get addicted to meth.
Yeah.
So like you don't have to like constantly try these things to like realize they're not what you think they are, but just realizing that like our brain's circuitry works in the same way with all of these different issues. Kind of can help you realize that like whatever you might be thinking about like trying to chase might be like not worth it in the end. I don't know if that makes sense.
Kind of. I actually did like the idea, the meth analogy.
Yeah,
as funny as it is, that makes sense because there are some things where I see it and I feel like I don't need to experience it to know. Mm-hmm. If anything, experiencing it would probably ruin my aversion to it, if you know what I mean, especially with meth. Especially with meth. Yeah. But no, it's an interesting topic. There was another thing I wanted to talk about. A lot less meta than all the shit we've been talking about so far. So this could be a nice break in the conversation to relax the mind, and then I'm sure we'll get back into some cool ass shit. Uh-huh. But okay, so you go to USC, as do I, and we just finished. Well, we didn't just finish. Like 2-3 months ago, we finished our first year of college. Right. So maybe I was hoping you could give a brief rundown of how your experience was first year, and then maybe we could possibly give advice to anyone who might be about to go to college. Because that's something we have experience in, you know. So we can talk about. We're qualified to talk about it.
No, my first year was like definitely a lot harder than I thought it was going to be going into it, and I think a lot of that had to do with like kind of the fact that I expected it to be something it wasn't, and I had different expectations going in. Going into it with like a long distance relationship was very hard for me because that was something that I clinged on to for like everything, for my happiness and whatnot. And like having that person not there, constantly like looking forward to the next time I was going to see them, I kind of didn't really experience things in the way I wanted to. And I think you can have a long distance relationship that's successful in college, but just in the way that I was like kind of, and in my belief about the relationship, like I used it for like everything that I wanted. Like everything I wanted in life was this relationship. Like, and I would not let go of that idea. So kind of not really being open to new experiences, I struggled a lot with like my anxiety, and like I had fear that like she was doing things that would be like that were unfaithful or whatnot, and it was really hard for me to like kind of calm myself down, especially losing that support system that I had at home, and not having that constant reassurance, like seeing her, made it really difficult for me to kind of like feel okay, and like basically the way I was coping was not very healthy either. I mean, I didn't party really or anything like the first semester. This is when I like really struggled, but I didn't like do anything like super unhealthy like drug use or like alcohol, but I just kind of didn't let go of like the anxiety, and I think that's something like that's hard to like realize. It's like, how do you let go of anxiety? But I see what you mean. Just realizing that like everyone else is in like the same situation as you, everyone like kind of lost their support system, can help you to like realize that just like going out and doing things, and experiencing things, like even though you realize you're probably gonna like do certain things like wrong of like by society standards. I'm very vague when I talk. Sorry.
No, I wanted to ask real quick about the anxiety thing, because I don't know if it's anxiety related, but I noticed I had this problem where I would see other people, like on my dorm, my floor, for example, like maybe they're going to a party or they're having fun or doing something like that. And maybe it was a night where I wasn't feeling as great, or I was just like chilling in my room, not doing anything. And it would kind of make me feel pressured, like, oh, I'm supposed to be doing that stuff. I'm wasting my time by not doing that stuff. I was wondering, did you ever feel that?
That is exactly like how I felt a lot of the time. Going into it too, like I didn't want to, like with the relationship, I was like, I don't want to do anything that's going to make her uncomfortable. and all of my friends were going out and partying, and I would constantly tell them I'm not gonna go because like blah 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 XYZ, and like there is so much peer like influence, peer pressure in college to like kind of not even directly like they're not telling me to go do these things, but like seeing them go do them and like feeling like left out is like you kind of want to like try to like.
Damn, that's a great. I never even thought of that like as a form of peer pressure. They don't have to deliberately tell you to do something.
That's why I said like peer influence. It's not really like they're not pressuring you.
It's like the pressure kind of comes from yourself.
Yes, exactly. And that fear that like you're missing out on something that everyone else is doing. And that's something that I think took me a couple months to get over. And then I finally started like deciding, I was like, oh, I'll go out with you guys and I'll see how it is. But you kind of, this is going back to like the ideas thing. You don't have to like live up to these ideas about like whatever college you think college is supposed to be, because everyone's college experience is like their own, and like you don't have to be like this cool college kid that goes to like the frat parties and parties every weekend. Like make it what you want to make it, and if you like just chilling in your room playing video games, there's nothing wrong with that, because honestly like the real reason I think so many people like to go out and party and stuff is because other people are doing it. And it's not really coming from within oneself.
What about, so I kind of get that where maybe you don't like to party, but you feel pressure to party because it's like that's what the college thing seems to be, right? I don't think you should necessarily feel like you should go to a party just because of that, but I also see the value in being open-minded and recognizing that there's probably a lot of experiences I haven't tried in college that I'm just going to automatically say no to because I just think I'm not going to, kind of like the expectations versus reality, flip the other way. You have expectations you're not going to like something, and then by doing it, you find out, oh, maybe I do like it. So maybe you're going to college not expecting to party. You don't feel like a partier, which definitely was what I was. But I forced myself to go to a few, I think. Yeah. And some of them I enjoyed, and some of them are a bit just too like ravey and wild for me. So, but I'm happy that I had the experience of going, because now I'm not going to be not going with the feeling like, oh, what if I went? Maybe like, that, because now I feel more solidified that I don't like the more ravey parties, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and that's why I think like the thing is with addiction and whatnot, like obviously like with meth you don't have to try it. Like with stuff like this, like that you feel like you're not gonna like, you kind of just like ease yourself into it, because like a lot of the party scene is like literally like drug use and alcohol as well. So like maybe like do some of the things that are like medically safer for you, and like kind of don't feel the need to necessarily like do things if you don't feel comfortable, but kind of push yourself to like experience new things that aren't like
I just want to give a warning, whatever you call. When I say like experience things, that doesn't necessarily mean like you have to start drinking because everyone else is like, I don't, because I don't drink, right? So, but I've never been like, but what if I try it and then I would like it and I'm just not wasting time not trying it. But like, some things you can stand your ground and just not do.
Yeah.
But I think maybe there's a shit advice, but it's very nuanced advice, because there's some things that aren't like that,
That's what's so
aren't so clear cut.
College life is like you gotta like know your boundaries, but if you don't like know anything about the experiences in the first place, like how are you gonna make boundaries with it? And that's why I think like so many people like to experiment with drugs, is because they don't really know what it's like and they kind of want to know. And then if they get into like something that's like really addictive or bad for you, like it's hard to get out of that cycle. I think that's why we have so many like drug issues in this country. That's why I think society is good in some ways, because you do what's societally. I mean, obviously there's things that are societally accepted that aren't very like good for you, like cigarettes and vaping. Like people do that all the time, or like smoke and vape all the time, but it's not good for you. But like kind of listening to society's advice and not trying things like meth.
Yeah, so like society can sometimes work as a heuristic on what not to try, without you having to explore yourself and face the risk.
Because I've drunk alcohol and smoked weed, and those are like things that most people are like, oh, that's not that bad. Yeah. And I think like the only reason I did it is because society is like, oh, it's not too bad. And I
just want to make it clear. I don't think it's bad to do either.
I don't think it's bad.
I think it's. I actually think it makes sense a lot of the time. Like if you can control it well, it's probably a great way to have fun.
Yeah, and
I just personally don't do it.
Yeah, I have like my own beliefs about like what people should do or what they shouldn't do, and I think sometimes people do abuse it. Of
course.
But yeah, I mean, there's nothing like inherently bad about.
Oh yeah, I think. All right, we're going on tangents, but I think people who view people that do drugs as like a moral issue, I just don't get that. I don't think it's immoral to do drugs. I think it's more just practical issues of doing drugs.
I think it could I think it could be like issues with like what emotional regulation you have. And,
that's a good point.
System, but I don't think like necessarily morally like. I'm not gonna. It's like a freedom thing. Like I'm not gonna like. If you want to do it, you do it. I might judge you for like doing things in the way you are, and like obviously like I try not to judge people just because I understand like issues that people have and like why it makes it more difficult for them to like control themselves. But obviously, morally, I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah, I agree. But going back to college, right? All right, so we're gonna challenge ourselves because I think I'm having this problem too, where we're just going to stay on the college topic for a second because I think, I don't know, it kind of excites me because like college is the one thing, or like like advice on college is one thing I feel like I could talk about, a little bit, like the whole qualifications thing, whatever. But so first semester, you said you were having a bit, it was like, like expectations versus reality, having a long distance relationship. That all makes sense. Second semester, how would you rate it? In comparison.
Second semester was so much better for me, and I think that was where I like really let go of a lot of those like expectations that I had, and I like after I got out of that relationship, I wasn't clinging to that for my happiness. I was kind of just like living and doing things that like made me happy for like my own reasons, kind of like not being addicted to something. I mean, I kind of was addicted to the gym for a little bit, but that's
much better thing to be addicted to.
Yeah, much better thing, I guess, for your health. But just kind of like, I don't know. I had so much more free time. I wasn't like constantly like worrying about like where my girlfriend was or like when I was gonna talk to her because I was like, we always like wanted to talk like every day, and just kind of having your own schedule and doing like whatever the fuck you want. That's like when I started doing that. And it really just opened up like this new like mindset for me, and it like made me a lot happier. But I don't know. It's hard to describe. Like you just kind of have to go through the experience, and I think like the first few months being hard for you is kind of like how it is for most people. I can't say all people because I know some people don't really struggle with it, but
no, I definitely had a similar experience, not from like a long-term relationship or anything, but just. Because, it's a big change in your life, moving like to another state and then being around different people. I watched some podcasts and they talked about how you increase your likelihood of getting depressive episodes a lot by changing your social surroundings very abruptly, whether it's good or bad, right? So you could say like going to college and getting to meet a ton of new people is a positive thing, but it's also a very drastic switch from knowing a ton of people where you live to not knowing anyone and having to make all new friends. Yeah. So I think it's definitely very common that people would kind of have a rough first few months. But I wanted to ask, because you said the second semester felt a lot better comparably, and I agree, my second semester was much better than my first. What were like practical or what were specific things you think you did that helped? Like going to the gym, for example, seemed like it probably helped a lot.
Yes. What you said was really interesting. I was in an abnormal psychology class last semester, and we talked a lot about how social support is one of the main like protective factors against depression, against anxiety disorders. And I think like even in the first semester, one thing that really helped me was like going back to those people that I had back home, calling my parents, and like talking about these issues was something that like helped me like a ton. And the first semester, like now that I'm thinking about it more. So we had 4 people that left our dorm room, right?
Oh, yeah.
We had 4 people that left because they wanted to go to, like, more party dorms. And then one other situation where one of the guys just left. So we had 4 people in our dorm. We had 4 rooms in our like dorm suite. So we were each in our own room. We didn't really talk. And like during the second semester, even like the first semester I had my parents to talk to, and I was talking to my girlfriend like a lot of the time, but I didn't really have anyone else around me. But that second semester, I started becoming so much closer with everyone that was in my dorm suite, building my social circle. That really helped me because then I could talk about things with them. And even just like I was saying, when you feel important, it makes you feel like a lot better, like physically, mentally. So like when you kind of have friends and just like a group of people you could like go eat with or do whatever with, hang out and just talk, that like helped me a lot. And then going to the gym, obviously, like because I had like issues right after I got out of the relationship with like self-esteem, self-image. I was struggling a lot to like get that part of me back, and also just like in terms of like the neurochemical issues and biological issues that I might have, like exercise is very helpful with that because it can remember Miss Tuttle, she said that it's like the best antidepressant actually, exercise. So I think just getting active and like doing things with my body, because during the first semester I didn't do much at all, that probably helped me. So I think the biggest 2 things I would say: exercise. Most colleges have gyms, go to them. But yeah, exercise, even if it's just to like not do weightlifting, just do like light cardio or whatever, and like try to befriend people around you. And I know sometimes it's hard when you don't know anyone. I had expectations about how my dorm mates were because they were all like partiers and I didn't see myself as a partier. But just like really get to know people, because a lot of the times when you get to know someone, even if you're different, usually you'll find something in common. And I am a very like friendly person, empathetic, and I try my best to like understand where people come from. So maybe I have like an easier time like making friends with like anyone, I guess. But I think truly just like trying to find someone or some group that really like understands you can help immensely. Exercise, friends, my 2 things.
Yeah, I wanted to say, because you're talking about maybe it's easier for you. One attribute I think you have that makes it really makes people feel a lot more comfortable around you is that you're pretty open about just like anything.
Yeah.
And like I feel like you get kind of vulnerable pretty fast. Vulnerable as in you like kind of break down walls in terms of what you'll talk about, like not just basic shit.
Yeah.
And I think like, I remember when we would, because I was kind of I was obviously nervous when I first got to college. That like we hung out a few days at the beginning. It was just nice because like I was like, damn, I know someone here. That's nice. So that could be another piece of advice for making friends specifically. Like obviously don't spill your heart out the first time you see them. You're like, yeah, my whole family died.
The crazy thing is, right? This is something Antoine. You know Antoine?
Yeah.
Yes. He made fun of me for it because I would like get in the elevator with someone. I'd be like, hi. And then I'd like be like, hey, what's your name? Because like I just wanted to meet people around the dorm. So I'd like introduce myself. I'd ask them their major and they'd ask me mine. And I'd be like, I'm psychology. And I'm like, they're like, why are you doing that? And I was like, well, because I have OCD, I have anxiety issues. Like I started going into my whole life story. I'm in a long-term relationship. It really ruined my like confidence and everything. And like in one elevator ride down like 2 floors, I would like get into that. And I think,
what were the reactions like?
They were just like, that's really cool that like that's the reason you're doing it and you struggle with it. So you like, I don't know. And like I didn't make like really great friends doing that with like a lot of the people. Most of the people like I met through our classes or like through mutual friends or the dining hall or whatever. But like I think that's a really good point, like why I feel like I am better at making friends, better than some, like I feel like some people think they are, just because I do open up like really quickly. And like when you open up to someone, like they feel like a lot more comfortable to do it. Because I feel like so many people just have surface level conversations, say anything at all. Like,
dude, I worked at Dutch Bros, and it's a coffee place, if you don't know. And it's super customer service based. Like, you're talking to them at the drive-through window, and they really encourage you to just have full-on conversations with them. But since you're only there for, like, 1 to 2 minutes tops, they're, like, kind of what you're saying, surface-level questions. And I remember I had a shift. It was Easter, and I was just at the window for 7 or 8 hours just having these conversations. And it, like, drains me because you're basically just doing the same shit. You know, you're, hi, hello, how's your day? Oh, it's great. How was your blah, blah, blah. Oh, what are your plans for today?
Yeah.
And I think you bring up a good. Basically, trying to say I think you have a good point about the sooner you get to more
actual things that people care about.
Yeah.
Like, because I work at H&M, and I literally just like, hey, how you doing? How's your day going? Same
Do you
thing,
go with
like,
that voice too?
Like, no, not usually. I mean, sometimes,
Hey, how you doing?
If the girl's pretty, I mean.
Hey, that's what you gotta do.
I'm kidding, but no. I was just like, it's just the same thing over and over, and like that's why I like try to find something that like people care about, and that's one thing that Dale Carnegie in that book I was talking about, how to like influence people and win friends or whatever. He talks about like trying to actually like listen to what people have to say and find what like interests them. That's like one great way to like actually make friends. It's like even if it's not interesting to you, like if you're making them feel important, they'll like come back to you.
Yeah, and I've heard some people critique that point, being like, it's fake or something, or toxic to pretend something's interesting when you don't. But what I think, and maybe this is just me, I think you could find interest in anything just by kind of being, well, first off, just try to be curious about it. And maybe there's certain questions that you don't really want to ask because you don't really care about the answer. But there's probably something about a topic where you could ask and you would actually be interested in what the answer is.
Yeah. And he talked about that in the book. He's like, a lot of the times people like might claim that this is manipulative or might claim that it's like inauthentic, but like a lot of the times like you can genuinely find interest in anything. Like, I mean, unless you're just some like guy that just doesn't have any interest. But, like, I feel like we're two really open-minded people, so maybe we're speaking from a biased perspective, or like we're ignorant to like how other people work. But like I don't know. I just think you could find interest in anything. Like sometimes if some people are talking about something, I'm like I'm not really interested. But if you're just like having a one-on-one conversation with someone, my point is like if it's a group conversation and they're talking about something else, like, but if you just are truly trying to like connect with someone and like hear them out, then I think in a one-on-one conversation you could find things interesting even if they're not to.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping to. One of the skills I hope to gain with this podcast is when I'm listening to someone talk, like a guest, for example, I subconsciously, consciously try to, as they're talking about something, try to tell like maybe they get excited when they start talking about one thing and be like, oh, this clearly is something that excites them. Yeah. And then see like something I could find interesting in it and then ask them a question about it. Yeah. So I think that's commendable. Yeah, that's a great piece of advice in terms of just conversation skills in general.
Yeah. I think so too. And I think one thing like people do a lot too is like talking can like help you reduce social anxiety. I think so many people with social anxiety are like, what am I going to say next? And like if you like start just like talking to people and becoming interested in what they're saying, like you stop worrying about that and you become like a better speaker because you're just like listening to what they have to say as opposed to like, oh, what am I going to do next? Like where's this conversation going after this? I don't know. I just think listening is like a huge part about conversations that people miss. Like a lot of the times people are only worried about what they have to say.
Yeah, it's like the whole putting your focus outwards rather than inwards. Because then what's the point of even having a conversation if you're just focusing on what you're going to say next? Because like the main point of a conversation is to like get info from the other person. Yeah. Speaking of like social anxiety, I was curious because one of the things that I get nervous about a lot is just awkwardness, right? Like I think the fear, I don't know, for me, the fear of not having anything to say comes from just not liking the awkward silence and being in that position. And I've been trying to battle in my head, like, what's the best way to get around that? Besides just, I don't know, getting better at conversation skills. And I think part of it is just exposing yourself to a shit ton of awkward silence until your body or your mind just comes a little more relaxed to it.
No, that's a huge point. Like, since I'm in like psychology and I know a lot about like clinical psychology and stuff, anxiety, like a huge way to get over it is just exposure therapy. So if you're constantly like the way that they would treat social anxiety, we talked about this in my class, is like go out and just do some like dumb shit and just like say like just mess up when you're speaking or something. Yeah. Like be like if you're at your job or something, you just like completely mess up and say words wrong and then just like be like and then like it helps you to like realize that even if you do that, like nothing is gonna happen. Like they don't really, they're probably gonna forget about it in like 5-10 minutes.
Dude, I hate it because I know if I did that stuff, like practice that, like I feel super confident that you're right. Like it would go away, but it's just so hard to get yourself to do it.
That's the one thing about exposure therapy. Apparently, it's like the most effective form of therapy that we have for like most mental health problems. Like for depression, like there's certain things that you could do to help, but like exposure therapy is more effective at helping anxiety issues than any like other form of treatment is for any like, I don't know if I could say any, but like most mental health problems. But the one issue is just starting, because no one wants to start. Like if you're like, I have this huge fear of snakes, you're not going to be like, oh, I want to go in this pit of snakes real quick and get over it. Like that's not my first instinct. I don't think that's anyone's. But it's a hard thing, and I think that's where talking to people, like, it's gonna happen. Like if you just start talking to more people, it's gonna happen. But the more you talk to people, the more you're like preparing yourself for it and like other conversations. Does that make sense? Like
no, it makes complete sense. It's funny because I actually tried doing this thing last semester where I get kind of approach anxiety, like approaching strangers and starting a conversation. Because in my mind, I have like, it's like, oh, like I feel like I got to have something important to say if I'm going to, it's like irrational beliefs. But anyway, to try to do like a bit of exposure therapy, I try to do every day between classes. I would put my phone in my backpack so I couldn't look at it. So then I need to know what time it is. So I'd go up to 10 people and ask them the time. It's a very simple thing. There's very low stakes, unless you fuck up saying, what is the time? Like, you can't really... you go all Shakespearean on the... But I've noticed... I only did it for like 3 days because I was like, this is taking a lot of time. But I kind of want to try it again next semester where you slowly just increase the amount of things you do. So maybe a week, every day, 10 people you ask the time. Yeah. And then the next day... you ask maybe directions somewhere because, it's more of a conversation. And then maybe it's a random question. Yeah. And I think that could help with type of exposure therapy type stuff because not jumping into the deep end, but maybe slowly making your way up there can make it easier. That's
part of it. Like normally they form a hierarchy, like what you're willing to do at first. Because like if someone's like really scared of snakes, they're not going to be like, oh, put the snake around my shoulders first. Like, they're going to probably be like, you'll be in a room with a snake. It'll be like 10 feet away behind glass or something. Like, that'll be the first thing you do. And you slowly, like, increase your, like, the intensity of your exposure until you could, like, finally get to the point where it's like, oh, I'll do the, like, scariest thing I could think of. So that's, like, a good way to approach it, too. Like, if you're going to just do something, like, small, and then, like, eventually you go up to someone and you're like, what are you doing later or something? And because, like, everyone thinks that's probably an awkward question. Like, but if you like get to that point where you feel comfortable enough to do it, then you could like get over your fear of just talking to anyone for any reason. To be honest.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think thinking now actually, I think the way I'm doing this podcast is in some sense a bit of exposure therapy for me because I get nervous. I was like nervous to have like long form conversations, right? And one of my main goals is to get professors on in like fields that I'm interested in. Yeah. But I started with like podcasts just by myself, so no guest. I'm not uploading those, but I started just to get used to it. And then I'm starting with like close friends, like y'all, the people that I've had on so far. And then I actually wrote a whole plan. Like then I'm going to start with more acquaintances I have at USC. So they're not super close, but like I know them still. And then I was thinking like graduate students at USC doing interesting things, and then professors at USC. And then so damn that, I feel like doing exposure therapy subconsciously, bro.
No, you didn't even know you were doing it, but now, No, I mean, that's exactly how it works. You kind of just got to, like, that's what I think a big thing about life is. You kind of just got to ease yourself into, like, a lot of things. But you got to, like, actually do it. Because I think sometimes people hear that and then they, like, never really, like, do it.
Do you feel like you're good at doing things that you want to do? Like, having a motivation and then actually acting on it?
So, that's a tough question. I think I'm good to an extent. I mean, I don't have like it's hard. It's hard for anyone. Especially stuff that you have anxiety tied to. But I try my best to like I guess put myself out there, and like a lot of the times now, instead of being like more scared to do things, I like do something that makes it so like I have to like if you're scared to like text someone something, you just send the first text, and then you're like, I can't go back now. I gotta like.
Dude, that's perfect.
So like, if you're like trying to like ask someone out, like you send like one text and be like, do you want to go out? And then you're like in it. You can't like get out of it. So if you kind of like put yourself in that position, I feel like I've been trying to do that a lot more. Then it makes it a lot easier to like stick to it.
It sounds like you have an intrinsic motivation to do something, but you're nervous to do it, or there's some reason you're not doing it, and then you add an extrinsic motivation by sending the first text. It's like, okay, well now it's awkward if I don't send the rest of the messages.
You have to you kind of have to jump in. I think like another thing, like because that was kind of a broad question, like motivation and stuff like that. Like I think one thing that people struggle with is like they don't get to the point where they like if you want to go to the gym or you want to like start a like small business or you want to do whatnot, you need to like start forming habits. And I don't think like a lot of people do that, and that's why I'm like you can make a habit out of like kind of being spontaneous and doing these things that like you think are like scary, but then also you need to like form a habit to like start like the thing that's crazy to me. I was thinking about this. I'm trying to read a book about habits right now, the Atomic Habits. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I have. It's a good book.
You've read it?
I have, yes.
Yeah, I like started because I got it from my brother a while back, and then he didn't finish it. So I was like, "Do you guys still have it?" He's like, "Yeah." That's beside from the point. You can like one thing that I think is like crazy because I was like everything can be a form of addiction. I think like 95% of our actions can be either addictions or habits.
Interesting.
Because like,
explain.
So like going on your phone and like scrolling through like Instagram or scrolling through TikTok, like that's kind of like something that I would say like you're addicted to doing. If you like have a routine where you like go and brush your teeth, that's a habit. If you have like a routine where you go and go to the gym for like an hour and a half a day, that's like a habit. Like so most of the things you're doing are either like subconscious because they're habits or they're subconscious because you're like low-key addicted to doing them. Like I don't know.
Honestly, I think they're kind of two sides of the same coin where an addiction, the thing that makes it an addiction is that it's something you don't want to be doing. Like you're doing...
An addiction is like a bad habit. Is that what you're saying, kind of?
Kind of, but more so like the routine, right? After you do a routine for a while, it just becomes second nature. Like you kind of do it automatically. But the reason like you don't get critiqued because you have a morning routine is because a morning routine is probably something you want to be doing anyway. Whereas scrolling through a phone, it's also a habit you formed. It happens automatically, but it's something you would rather stop probably.
So you know what I mean? Could categorize it like as an addiction as opposed to like a habit.
I don't know if that's a great distinction, but that's just kind of how I thought of it in the moment.
I guess it is an addiction and a habit, kind of. Yeah. If you conceptualize it like that. Like if you're, I don't know if this addiction, everything could be an addiction thing is resonating with you as much as it resonated with me when I first thought of it, but I just think it's crazy because I think there's so much we do.
Oh no, I think I agree. I think anything can become an addiction, even good things. I think, yeah, I guess kind of just going back to what I said, I think what makes it an addiction is that it's something, like you're doing it to the point where it's detrimental to your life.
Yeah, and I think like that's where I'm kind of clashing with like the normally accepted definition of addiction because like that's usually like the way we like conceptualize it. But I was thinking like addiction, like obviously like it has a negative connotation, but I think like in terms of what an addiction like really means and the fact that it's like you're doing it because of like this feedback loop where it's like, oh, you're getting positive, and then like eventually it becomes like a need to fulfill, and then you do it again because it gives you that positive feeling. I think like that cycle is kind of like what I'm describing as addiction, as opposed to like what we medically and clinically like use addiction for to describe. But I don't know if that makes sense. I think
it sounds like more you're using addiction as like the mechanism of something mechanism rather than the positive or negative aspect of it.
Yeah, like addiction is kind of like the neural mechanism in which we I see. Kind of come to do certain things.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's a good way to describe it. I'm probably using addiction in a way like that would confuse a lot of people, but in my head, that's the way I've been thinking about it. Just like the way I've been like, what books I've been reading lately have kind of used it in that context.
I see what you mean. But. Interesting. Okay, so another thing I think we could talk about in terms of college advice is academics, because I feel like you are pretty intellectual. You seem like you're good when it comes to academics part of school. I was curious, did you enjoy the academic aspect of your first year of college, and maybe any advice you could give to anyone?
academics is the big part of college. Like, everyone's like, oh, I'm gonna go study, blah blah blah. But I think it's very similar to like high school academics, in my opinion. I feel like the big part about college for me, personally, like, was growing in that, like, I don't have the same support system, and like it's all everything outside of academics was, I think, where I grew more in my past semester, or in my past year in college. Academics, it was very similar to like high school for me, and I don't think, like, this is one thing I've said. I don't think like the institution you go to like necessarily implicates what kind of education you're getting. I think it like implicates opportunities for research or opportunities for jobs in the future, because the name on the degree is obviously like more prestigious based on the university. But I think like in terms of academics, like it didn't feel that much different from high school to me. And maybe that's because I was in AP classes, but like it wasn't hard. I didn't feel like. Does that make sense?
No, I get it. I think probably the AP classes does help because I guess they are
Yeah.
more college level classes. So you're saying your first 2 semesters of college, the academic aspect of it didn't really feel super different from high school, but it was more all the other aspects that you felt like you actually leveled up or grew up.
College, the real thing that I think college has taught me is like how to live on my own, how to deal with things on my own, regulate emotions better, and like do all this like independently, as like opposed from doing it like with your family like constantly around you, like how most people exist in high school. And I don't think like the academics were really like the part that helped me grow. I think just like the environment, and I think that's why moving out for college has been so impactful for me. Not because the university I'm going to, although it's like a very accredited university, is like very prestigious, but I think more so just the fact that I'm diverged from like that social support system I already had. In terms of academics, I like did pretty well. Obviously, it's like added stress. The more difficult classes you add, the more tough it's going to be to like manage your time and whatnot, and the more like difficulties you're going to have like keeping your grade up. But it wasn't too difficult for me, and maybe that's because I'm like really good at school, and I don't struggle a lot with like even like pretty difficult topics. But I don't know. Like in terms of academics, I don't have much to say because it was just the same thing as high school was to me.
I think what you're saying kind of brings up a good point where a lot of people view college as just a chance to get your education, which is a big part, right? You know, you do learn a lot more than you'll learn in high school, depending on what major you take. But it sounds like what you're saying is there's a lot of aspects of college that help you grow, not just academically, but you know, you personally. Basically what you're saying, personally, socially, being able to live on your own, stuff like that. And maybe people don't initially think of that as a benefit of going to college, right? Yeah. They just think like they'll be like, a lot of people argue maybe you don't need to go to college because you can learn a lot of the shit online, right? Yeah. And that makes sense, especially maybe if you don't have the finances to go to college, things like that. But I think they're missing a key point is in how much college helps you grow in other ways, essentially.
Yeah, and then there's this guy, I don't know if you've heard of him, his name's Gerbert Johnson. He's a YouTuber. He's kind of a goofball. He makes like really like funny,
with a name like Gerbert. You got it.
He makes like really funny, like kind of like weirdly philosophical, but like also very like comical and like meme videos. But like he was talking about like one of the reasons he went to college was just because like that's what everyone else is doing. And I think after I graduated high school, I was like, where's the community I had with like school? You're in elementary school, middle school, high school for like 18 years of your life, and then that all gets like wiped away, and then you're literally like living in your house with your parents, but you don't have like that thing, unless you have a job, you don't have that thing that like that community that kind of brings you together. And I think that's what college, like he was saying, did for him, is like kind of give him that sense of community when everyone is like very isolated nowadays, with people like basically using the internet for like their main form of communication. So like when you go to college, like it gives you that opportunity to like see a very diverse set of perspectives, as opposed to just being a place. And I think one thing about the academics in college, as opposed to like learning everything online, as you're saying, is like it forces you to, because if you're planning to go to college, a good point. It forces you to do that research. It forces you to do the homework and whatever assignments. So like it'll motivate you to do it because you don't want to like waste the money you're spending. But in terms of like academics as opposed to like high school, it's not that different in my opinion. I think the main places I've grown in college have not been in the classroom, but outside.
Interesting. I kind of agree with the whole academics in college being similar to high school. I will say my second semester, though, I have a slightly different perspective where I think I grew a lot academically in the sense that a lot of first off, my classes were very hard my second semester, or at least to me, like especially my physics class.
Yeah,
you know.
I'm sure.
And I think what it helped taught me was because college is you only have the class maybe 2 to 3 times a week rather than every day. So I realized how much more self-study I have to do because a lot of times the professor isn't going to explain everything super in depth to the level that you need. Mm-hmm. So I think I grew in a lot that I was able to learn how to learn on my own a bit. Mm-hmm. Like I developed a lot better studying strategies. I remember my first Calc 3 midterm I did trash on. Mm-hmm. It's like, what? Because I thought I knew this stuff pretty well. Like I think I did the practice exam. Yeah. But I didn't look at the answers afterwards. I would basically just do the practice exam and just gauge, like, if I felt good while doing it, then, okay, I must know this stuff. And then I obviously didn't. So that was one thing I learned, to check the answers after to see if I got them right. And then just doing practice problems. I didn't do that a lot in high school to study, right? I would just do the homework. But now I had to, like, actually go find problems that would help me and do them on my own. So I think in that aspect, basically I just wanted to say one thing that might be different about college academics is that it could be a lot more self-studying depending on what classes you take. And I think that's very useful in helping you become more independent because you don't need, like, learning how to learn on your own feels really freeing because then you don't always feel like you need a teacher.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I feel like I do really well in school, and normally I do. So I'm in psychology, which is not that hard of a major, I'm not going to lie.
Hey, you got stats next semester, though. I'm sure that hard. You don't think so? No. I've never taken a stats class.
I haven't either.
You'll have to tell me how it is.
Yeah, I will. I'll definitely, because I'm taking 2 stats classes. Actually.
That's crazy.
I know. It's 2 stats classes and then some journalism stuff. But no, like, when I was in Calc 2, my second midterm, I got like a 58.
Really?
My final, I got like a 54.
Oh, damn.
But part of the reason why I think I did so bad, like, I didn't really care about that class.
Did you know you were going to switch at that point?
At that point, I knew I was going to switch majors. It was no longer a major requirement, so I was taking pass-fail. I was like, as long as I get a C
and
I pass, then I'm good. Hey. And it was like right after I'd broken up with, or I like got out of that relationship, so I was like obviously like not in a very like good state of mind, so I wasn't really trying that much in school. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm talking from a perspective where it's like the classes I'm taking aren't that hard, so that's why I was like, let me clarify, like I'm good at psychology classes. I don't know how I would do it. Like in engineering, I wasn't doing terrible, but it's like things are going to be a lot harder in college. I'm not going to lie. Like a lot of the classes are a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
It's not too much different.
And even if the classes aren't more difficult than high school, just all kind of what you mentioned earlier about all the added stresses of living on your own kind of pile on and make them more difficult.
Yeah. No, regardless of like whether or not the content is harder, when you're doing all this other stuff, it makes it more difficult to like focus on just school. Where in high school, like you have nothing else to do. I mean, you
had a lot more taken care of for you.
Yeah.
In terms of living situations.
Yeah. No, that's what I meant.
All right. So with all this college talk, we're about to go back to college. Mm-hmm. How do you feel? Do you have a game plan for the semester? Are you feeling excited, nervous, all these emotions?
It's mixed feelings because I really like it here. Back home, you know, I mean, it's very much so like I know this place like the back of my hand. I know all the streets. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go.
Feel like a big dog, you know.
I know. I feel like I'm like this is my hometown. And like recently starting work, I really do like all my coworkers and I like the environment. It's like been super fun this summer actually, which I did not necessarily expect when I was getting a job. So I'm kind of sad I got to leave them, but I'm definitely excited because even though like last semester I was like, I don't know how to feel about going to college, I'm really excited to see how this new living situation, I'm with a bunch of different new roommates and like the new classes I'm in are going to like open up opportunities for me to grow. And I think there's like a lot of new experiences to be had for this upcoming year. So I'm excited, but also living on my own this year, having to make food. I'm like, how is this gonna go? We'll see.
I realized I was in the kitchen today making something, and I realized, oh shit, I gotta buy like a pot and a pan because now I'm gonna be making food instead of the dining halls.
Yeah.
I was like, what type of pot and pan do I get?
Do you even have like any meal plan or no?
I have the apartment meal plan, so I think it's like 40 swipes a semester.
Okay, so you're gonna have to make like a lot of food, is what you're
Yeah,
saying.
but I've luckily this summer I've been preparing. I got like a system down of cheap groceries I could get, and then meals I can make pretty easily.
Yeah.
I had a question, kind of what you were saying about how you really like it here. What I've noticed being here now is now that I've lived in 2 places for a decent period of time, no matter where I'm going to be for the rest of my life, there's always going to be like some people I'm missing.
Yeah.
Because I've been missing people this summer back in college.
Yeah.
But I know for sure last semester I was missing my friends here.
Yeah.
So you're always going to be missing someone now.
That's what my parents have always told me. They're like, you have your high school friends, you have your college friends, you have your work friends. It's like you kind of move through different stages of your life, and then like you kind of what someone told me last semester is actually like when you go home from college during the summer and then you come back, it's like you're living 2 separate lives.
That's what it feels like.
You have your home life where all your like high school friends are, and then you have your college life, and they're just like 2 separate worlds that like don't really intermingle. It's kind of weird to like think about like, I don't know, having to like not be with certain people like when you're in that other environment.
It makes me so excited in the future to have a wedding. It just it's like the what is it, Endgame, where all the different people interact and see how that's how it feels, bro. Yeah. But I totally agree. The whole 2 different lives thing. Mm-hmm. What I found really weird was first semester I was there for like 2 months, 3 months, and then I visited home for like a few days. And I thought it was gonna feel super different when I got back, but it literally like right away just felt like I was back.
Yeah.
It felt like I've been there the whole time. Like I never left.
It was weird. Coming back from like this last break. I was like, oh, this is going to be weird. I don't know if I'm going to like mesh with like everyone back home. And it's like, you just kind of pick back up.
Yeah.
And it's like nothing was different.
It's crazy.
It's weird to think about like everyone, like all the people that went to different schools, like they've had completely different experiences, but you could still come back and like hang out with them. And it'll be like kind of like old times. It'll be a little different, but it's like, you kind of just pick back up where you left off.
Yeah. And that's how I feel like, you got good friends if you could be apart for so long and come back and it just feels like normal again.
Yeah.
All right. So we're back from the bathroom. We both went separately, of course. Very needed.
Not like there's any issues going together.
Yeah. If you want to go together, like be my guest, of course.
Judge,
we won't judge. We just didn't do that ourselves. But, okay. I had another question.
Yeah.
Kind of unrelated from what we were talking about. So you're majoring right now in psychology, right? And you have a minor in music, something? So
I'm majoring in psychology, and I actually am taking a songwriting class this upcoming semester, but I'm not minoring in it. My plan initially was to major in psychology, graduate in 3 years, and then go immediately on to like trying to work on like a clinical psychology doctorate, become a therapist. But I am like, I don't know if that's exactly what I want to do, so now I'm going to be majoring in psychology. I'm taking 2 journalism classes next semester, actually, a class on podcasting, and then more of like intro journalism.
Yeah, I actually had a quick question about the podcast class.
Uh-huh.
So are you like thinking about starting a podcast in the future? Is that where you're taking it?
I mean, since we had that like experience taking that or making that podcast in the past, like I don't necessarily know if I have any ideas right now, but I always like think podcasts are like something that would suit me, just because I really like hearing about other people's stories and I like talking a lot. So, I mean, put the 2 together and then make a podcast.
I was curious because funny enough, we were originally trying to do the same major, right? Physics and philosophy.
Yeah. And
I'm curious if that stems from basically being interested in a lot of things.
Yeah.
Because one of the reasons I'm starting this podcast is because I'm interested in a lot of different things, but I know I can't become an expert in everything. So I think a podcast would be a way for me to talk to experts about things I'm interested in while being able to focus on one thing to become an expert in myself.
Yeah.
I was curious, like, is that also part of the motivation?
Yeah. No, I've always been interested in like so many things. I'm like one of those people, I want to be like an expert in everything. I'm like, I want to be a plumber, but then on my day off, I'm going to be a firefighter, and then I'm going to work as a doctor on a day after. But no, I like always have wanted to like try to learn as much as I can and like be as smart as I can in like every single field. And I think that's part of the reason why I chose that major in the first place. And then podcast, I don't even know what I'd want to do with the podcast, but part of the reason is because I'm thinking of adding a journalism major, but initially I was thinking of just doing a podcasting minor, because they have a podcasting minor in the school, and I think it would give a good perspective, especially because there would be like audio classes I'd have to take, and I do produce music as well, so it's like that might be something that would help me out, but I'm not exactly sure if I'd want to start a podcast, but definitely I would say I resonated with the fact that like I'm interested in a lot of things. That's exactly why I picked that major in the first place, and that's exactly why I'm trying to double major now.
I think it's also smart. I feel like you're taking advantage of college in the sense, especially USC, because you just have an interest in podcasts at least, and there's a podcast class, so you're like, why don't I take it?
Yeah.
I think that's very smart.
Yeah. And I'm trying my best to like make sure I still have everything set up for like in line to graduate in 4 years exactly. But I don't know, like I should have the room to do it, but I'm trying my best to like use any extra credits or units I have to take those classes that I'm interested in. That's why I'm taking the songwriting class, because we get up to 18 units. All my other classes are 4, so that songwriting class will push me to like 18, and then I basically
That's
am
kind
not
of the
like
limit.
yeah, I'm not like sacrificing any like extra time because I'm just doing it like within what I'm given by the university.
Yeah.
So I think like trying your best to like utilize all the resources. I'm trying. I think I'm going to be overloaded next semester with stuff to do, working and then classes, and then I'm a part of one club, and then I'm starting another club.
You're starting another club?
Well, so me and my friend have this idea to do like we both like are music producers, so we're like, what helps people to get to the point where their music is heard on the radio, is heard like on TikTok, becomes big, and they blow up for whatever reason. So we're trying to start a club on independent music marketing.
Wow.
But it's like a lot of logistical things with starting a club, so we have to like go through that whole process. It's me and just like one other friend from down there, and it's been a journey. We've been like having meetings all summer. I have a meeting with him tomorrow actually, and we will see if that gets materialized.
Dude, that's exciting. I had no idea. What type of stuff would the club be doing? So independent music marketing?
Yeah, so he has a background where he's worked with this guy who does like a lot of competition. So there was this competition that he was trying to do at USC last semester, and this friend of mine, his name is Arnav, he's in engineering. So he was trying to do like an engineering competition, basically try to get like people to produce a bunch of like ideas and then pitch them to judges, and then like whoever wins would get like $1,000, which they would get from like sponsors or whatever for the competition. So he comes from a background like that. So he has an idea to do like a music competition, and then we could do like prizes for the music competition, and like that's like one. He thinks that would be as like provide evidence that what we have been doing like can help someone get publicity as a musician, like an independent musician. So that's like where he wanted to go. I think I'm in another club right now. It's just like weekly meetings, discussing like mental health subjects and topics. So what I was thinking is like we could do like a weekly meeting and do it on like some music marketing topic for like independent musicians. Like 1 week we could talk about like how to budget your campaign, and then the next week we could talk about like creating a persona or like breeding authenticity within like your own like brand, and like basically just having like weekly meetings where we kind of have this presentation but then get input from other people as to like what they think. Maybe we'd have like a weekly meeting where it's like musician spotlight, and we'd go into like depth about like one of like the people in our club, and like we could all discuss like what we think they could do in terms of like marketing or whatnot. And I think it's like really fusing that interest I have in like business, because I'm not like obviously majoring in business, but I think it's like something that's like very like cool, and like business and advertising is very much like grounded in psychology, and then also that music. So it's like I'm not fulfilling that through my academic classes as much because I don't have the space to, but if I can like use my extracurricular time to like make a club focused on music and like business marketing, I think that's like a great opportunity through the university and the people that are there and that are very talented, to kind of expand what I'm getting.
That sounds like an amazing idea. Yeah. I always hear that one of the best things to do in college is to start a club, because not only do you get experience like leading a team and shit like that, but you can also kind of leave a legacy if the club still sticks around afterwards.
Yeah.
But with music, is music something that you would be interested in the future, like pursuing?
I would, but it's difficult. I don't have like a ton of motivation to like make music in the recent past because it's a lot of work, like technical knowledge, understanding. Like,
I see.
I can't like I've had issues recording music a lot of the times because my microphone, the way it like links up to my computer, it's like all weird sounding. So I'm just making beats at this point.
I remember you showed me, we was like outside that 1 unit physics class we took. You were showing me fighting these demons or something.
Yes,
I thought it was pretty nice. It was catchy.
That song I made a couple of years ago at this point actually.
Wow.
But no, I think it's something that's really cool. I also just don't know if I find fulfillment in it, and it's very hard to like survive in music. And what I want to do is like probably be like the artist. Like I wouldn't want to like work in the background, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But also that's like, is that something I really want to do? It's not really a sustainable career. Like only the top, like, I don't even know, but like only like the really top artists are the ones that can like survive and make a living off of it. So it's like, I want to like continue making music, but it's very hard to like feel motivated when it's like something only very few people can like be successful at.
Yeah, I feel like though you could do it on the side with this whole psychology thing, and then learning about psychology gives you so much content for songs you can make, bro.
Yeah.
But real quick about the whole motivation thing, like only a few people can make money, stuff like that, or live off it. That was one of the things that kind of made me nervous about the podcast. Is just like there's like over 1 million podcasts now, right? So luckily, like money isn't my main motivation or anything. I'm not expecting this to make money at least for like years if I even do it for that long. It's more interest. But one thing that kind of helped me get more motivated was this idea because the internet's so democratized and so many people have access to it. There's so many people that can make content, right? And I feel like you don't necessarily have to be the best, or you have to be like one of the top podcasters, or in your case, like singers and musicians, right? But you just need to be unique enough where a local or a community, at least a small community of people will choose you over someone else because they like your uniqueness over everyone else. And if you could just make that community large enough to sustain you, it doesn't have to be like you don't have to be like Shawn Mendes and have a huge following. But if you just have a big enough following to sustain you, and I feel like that's a lot more possible these days than in the past, if that makes sense.
No, I think it is too. Just the fact that like more people have access to the internet makes like the audience larger. But like the market, like you said, is so oversaturated.
That's true.
There's just so many people that are like making music, so many people that are recording podcasts now that it's like, what is it like? Is what I'm doing enough to like draw people away from these other artists?
I see. Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's like that's why I think a big part about that music marketing is like creating a brand. I think that's a huge part about like any like sort of marketing venture you have. It's like you got to create a brand for yourself and like get people to remember you by something. And I think that's like a big motivation for why I want to create the club. Just because I don't really have experience in doing that. And people know me for how I am, but it's like I don't market myself to like people that I don't know by doing that. Like
I see what you mean.
Like we always have like this. Is it called a psyche? I don't know what it's called. Like what's the word? Where it's like you have a conception of like something.
I'm not sure.
But basically, like you have like when I think of Strad, I'm like, oh, that's Strad. Like I have like a conception. It's a word in psychology. I forget what it's called. But like I have that for like everyone. But it's like I don't use that conception that people have of me to market myself. And I think that's like one thing you need to do if you want to be successful in any like market.
Do you ever wonder what people's conception of you is?
Yeah, all the time.
Like when your name pops in their head, what's the box they put you in?
Yeah, exactly. No, I think about that all the time.
I hate it because you'll like never really know. I feel
you never really know because I mean, even if they tell you, like
you don't know.
You don't know for sure. They could be lying. They could just be saying whatever they think will make you happy. It's like that's the thing about humans. A lot of times, like we're so bad at detecting lies because like you can never really know things for sure. Yeah. Especially about like human behavior and stuff like that. It's like it's weird. It's definitely weird. But no, I wonder that all the time.
Real quick, going back to your schedule next year. So you have psychology classes, you have the podcast class, you have journalism classes, you have this club for music you're trying to do, music on the side maybe. Mm-hmm. So do you ever get, like, it's a lot of stuff, right? Do you ever get nervous that because you're not focusing on one thing enough that you're not going to become like good enough at something? Because that's something I struggle with a lot.
All the time. And I think like I try my best to excel at everything I do. But the more you like decide to do, like the more you're taking away from that one thing. And I think that's a problem, like a really big problem in our job market, is that they expect you to get a job. Like a lot of the times, like even if you're working in like with different companies, like you're a computer scientist and you're working with like Microsoft, and then you transfer and you're working with like Google or whatever, like you're doing like the same thing over and over. But I think so many people, like maybe it's just me, I know you're kind of like this too though. So many people have like different interests where it's like you don't want to do that for like, I feel like I wouldn't be satisfied doing something for my whole life, or like basically becoming a psychologist, and like obviously I want to be an expert in that field. And like if you want to be an expert, you kind of have to like compete with them, so you have to like put in the amount of time they're putting in. But like I don't know if I'd want to like dedicate my life to one thing. Does that make sense?
No, it makes complete sense. I have like pretty much the same problem, and I've been trying to figure out ways to not cope, but I don't want to say fix, but just help with the problem, right? And my ideas have been, first off, I try to look at it like instead of being an expert solely in physics or solely in nanotechnology, which is like a field I want to go into, maybe I have two different fields that I kind of work at the intersection at. So at least there's like two different fields I could work in that kind of help satiate the interest. But another thing I've been trying to do is I think there's freedom in not doing things, in the sense that if I pick like 3 or 4 things maybe, right, that I want to just be good at, right? Yeah. Maybe in order, like I make order, or like maybe this is the thing I want to be an expert at, and then this is the thing I want to be good at, but maybe not an expert at. And I kind of order them in that sense. And then I just forget about everything else, right? It kind of gives me freedom in the sense that now I could start focusing on these things and getting good in them. But by having like 3 or 4 of them, I can kind of cycle through them. So when I get bored of one thing, I can go to the other. And then instead of just keep going to different things, I could cycle back to the thing I got bored of initially. So I'm still making progress in certain areas. Yeah. That's going to be that's like my strategy for this semester and year.
No, that's smart. That's smart. It's just like, I don't really want to pigeonhole myself into one thing. And that's where it's like really hard when we kind of, our society functions in that way. And if you want to like if you want to have a successful career, you kind of have to do that. In my essay for why I wanted to go to USC, actually, I was like introducing it with this quote that I asked this guy at this leadership conference one time. I was like, how do you find your one true passion? And because I applied for philosophy and physics, that major, the whole point of my essay was like, oh, if I go to USC, I don't have to like find that one true passion. I could pursue both, because it's a major that incorporates both fields, and they're kind of diverse fields. But like the fact that I switched from that to engineering, I switched to psychology, and now I'm trying to add journalism and like music. It's like I don't know if I'll ever be like satisfied with like doing one thing, and I think that's like a part of our society that's like really, there's like a big issue. It's because I think a lot of the times too, you have to get like, we have to be qualified to get a job. You have to like get a degree in something. Like if you want to get a degree, or if you want to work as like a certified public accountant, I'm using this as an example because my parents, like, you should get an accounting degree. But if you like, obviously it's going to like help you in the work field, but I feel like a lot of the times it's just like a thing that is like a title, and it like, if you work at that job, you could figure out how to do it if you like just worked there. Like you don't necessarily need the college degree, the 4 years of education, and the money that it costs to like work a lot of these jobs. And I think the fact that like we are making people like go to college to get jobs is like part of the issue with like making people do one thing for the rest of their life. Does that make sense? I
kind of see what you mean. Tell me if this is similar, because one of the reasons I chose physics and philosophy initially was because I was thinking, because I was originally mechanical engineering, but then I wanted to learn the theory more, and I thought, and I could be wrong about this is just my assumptions, that whatever engineering job I would have got out of college, I would have had to learn a ton of new stuff anyway because it'd be specific to that job. And I probably wouldn't have learned it in college. And I'm sure an engineering background would give me like a better set of knowledge for that job. But I thought I chose physics and philosophy instead because I think it would teach me more problem solving skills and just skills for learning in general. So then when I get to the job, it'd be easier to learn those things on the job, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's like basically what I'm saying. Like a lot of the times, like it helps. Like obviously, if you want to be a nurse, you should go to like nursing school or whatnot. But there's so many jobs that you could learn everything you need to know on the job. Like you don't need to like do the 4 years of schooling to like do it. And it's like kind of weird in the way that like we're using it as a way to like, I guess, select people that we think are like smart or whatever. And it's basically like who is most successful at learning in this system, as opposed to like who is most like, because even if you have a degree, you're not necessarily the most qualified for a job, I would say. I don't know. This is just my thought. I think there's a lot of issues with like the society we live in and like the job market. But I'm the visionary, I would say maybe a little too much sometimes.
Okay, well, we've been going almost 2 hours, and after this podcast, I'm realizing there's so much more we could talk about, and I think it's lucky that we both go to the same school, because I would definitely be down to have you on again, assuming you're down. And so basically what I do at the end of each podcast is I ask the same question to each guest, because I like to see the different perspectives that I get from the question. So this is the final question of the podcast. What is something that you've learned in your life that has impacted your life in a significant way?
Okay. What is something I've learned in my life that's a very hard question. And I feel like I had an answer. I feel like I had an answer, but I don't know what it is.
I bet I know what's going on in your head. You have so many answers.
I have a lot of things that I can say. But one thing, and I think this resonates with like a lot of what I've said, we had to do like this thing for IB called the extended essay. It was like a 4,000 word essay. And I did mine on abortion, and it was like based on like this argument that this one author made, and it was an analogy. And basically my whole thing that I learned from like having to do that like long essay was like, even though analogies are great and we can like gain a lot from like using the same reasoning in a different situation, you can't necessarily compare and like anything to something else, because like in the reality of the situation, the analogy is not the situation. Like you can analogize all you want, but like it's not the same as like the issue. So like a lot of the times when people are making arguments by analogy, like you kind of equate something that seems equivalent logically, but it really isn't, because there's everything in this world is much more nuanced than you could think. And I think that goes back to me saying like a lot about expectation versus reality.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you said that, because I feel like I use analogy so much in my thinking, but that's a really good point, because like when I hear someone use an analogy to make an argument, my mind, I just automatically go, oh shit, okay. Yeah. But that's a good point, because it's, even if they seem similar, there's differences between the two situations. Exactly. So it doesn't necessarily should work as an argument all the time.
Yeah, I think analogies are important, and I think we need them in a lot of situations, like when you're making a point in an argument and you can't like necessarily prove it in any other way. But I think we overuse analogies to the point where it's like we are like creating a different, like the thing with expectations versus reality, you're creating a different expectation for like an event that isn't the same thing. So in reality, like everything is very distinct and a lot more nuanced. That's what I have to say.
I think that's a really good piece of information to keep in mind. Well, I really enjoyed having you on.
Yes, thank you so much.
I hope I'll have you on again soon. Yeah, thanks for being on.